let's make a start. So good morning or good afternoon. For some, I know it's a very early morning. For others, it's more good afternoon or good evening. So thank you so much for joining us today, and particularly for joining all around the globe. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Bevan, so I'm the Director of Statistics Division at ESCAP, and I have the privilege of moderating this very first Stats Café of 2022. So let me start by saying Happy New Year. I think I can just about get away with that, although we're now into February. But just, really, really praying and hoping that this coming year is one of peace and prosperity for us all. So let me just have a quick start as well with some housekeeping rules. Firstly, can I ask that everybody keeps themselves muted, and the organisers will actually mute people who leave themselves unmuted if they're not speaking. So just to warn you about that. Secondly, can I ask panelists, actually they're already doing it, so you've already put your videos on and keeping them on. So thank you very much for that. And finally, if people have questions or comments as we're hearing from the different panelists, please can you put these in the chat? So we're trying to manage the sessions so that we will have enough time at the end to ask some questions, but also it would be great to hear from you as well. So if you have any particular reflections as we're going through the session, not just questions, but if you've got other experiences you want to share, please do also kind of put those in the chat, because that will be really, really useful as well, so we can hear from as many people as possible. And also just to note as well that we're recording this session so that others can watch it back afterwards. So as you know, today the topic we're going to look at is women in leadership in official statistics. So research in the book The Authority Gap showed that parents estimate their sons' IQ levels at 115 and daughters at 107. Similarly, adult men estimate their IQ at 110, but women at 105. This really shows us that there's some really embedded gender biases across society. And we know already as well that women do 75% of unpaid work, yet official statistics often focus only on paid employment. So we know that this is an issue we really need to address. We need to make sure that women are included in official statistics. And one of the ways we can do that is to also ensure that women are represented in the leadership levels in official statistics. So today we're going to explore how different women have confronted established gendered social norms and stereotypes, especially in a male-dominated workplace, and how any bias and discrimination was challenged and addressed. We will also explore how these leaders became the role models and mentors that they are for both women and for men. But finally, we'll also look at how we can look at the opportunities to actually develop stronger leadership voices. We want to look at ways we can encourage more women into leadership positions. And we also want to look at the specific barriers that there are to female leadership in official statistics and how we collectively can overcome them. So today, as you can see already, we have a really great lineup of speakers who are going to share much more about their experiences. To save time so that we have much more time to hear from them, I'm just going to briefly introduce each of them, and then they can share a bit more about their individual backgrounds as they answer the different discussion questions which we've given them. So on the panel today, we have two heads of national statistics offices. So first we have Dr. Pianuch Wuttisorn, Director General of Thailand National Statistical Office here. So great to have you with us. And then we also have Aisha Hassan, Chief Statistician for Maldives Bureau of Statistics. Then we also have Shalja Sharma, who's Director of the Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific in ESCAP. And we have Claire Melamed, CEO of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, GPSDD. And then finally, someone who probably needs no introduction at all, we have Gemma Van Halderen, who's General Manager of Australian Bureau of Statistics, but many of you probably also know her in her previous role as the Director of Statistics Division here in ESCAP. So I'm going to ask a series of questions to each of the panelists, And I would ask that the panelists would please try to limit their responses to around 2 minutes or less, so that we have time to cover all the different questions and hear from all the panelists. And hopefully then we should also have time at the end for questions, but also to share your own other experiences as well. So do put questions into the chat bar. Also, if you've got things you want to share from your own experiences or any ideas that you have on how you can address these issues, please also put those into the chat bar. And just to say as well, I'm going to go through each of the questions, but in terms of hearing from the speakers, I was doing it alphabetically. That's how I've structured them. So the list that I have, the first question to all the panelists, can you describe your leadership style and how you lead others? And is it different from your male counterparts? So first of all, we wanted to go to the Maldives. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity. So going back to the question, I would say it's not. It's a difficult question to answer because my style of leadership depends on the type of work and the experience and knowledge of the colleague that I'm dealing with. Because if, let's say, a colleague is very much confident in his knowledge on the subject area, then I would be more of like a free rein leader, where I would leave the colleague to do his or her own decision making. So if they need more motivation, then I would be a very participative kind of leader. And if like they need more guidance and support, then in that case I would be very authoritative like kind of leader. So but then to the second part of the question, I would say that in Maldives we have more women in the NSO. It's like more than 70% of women in the organization. So in the top management is dominating women. So I don't know how different it would be if there's a male counterpart. So I would leave that part to the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And really interesting to note that, and great to hear about your own style and how you're able to flex it depending on the context. Next, for the same question, we were going to Claire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning here from London. You can just see the sky brightening in the window behind me. It's a real pleasure to be on this panel. I've always been struck, actually, in the world of statistics, how many women leaders there are. You know, when I first became I'm not a professional statistician, and my sort of engagement in the world of data and statistics perhaps came slightly later than some of you. And I've always been struck, you know, when I started in this role was when Gemma was in hers, and there've always been, you know, and there's always been many senior women in the world of statistics, in stark contrast to other similar academic disciplines like economics, for example. I don't know why that is, but it has always been an environment which has had strong women to look up to as role models and to work with, and I've always really enjoyed that. I mean, for myself, I always remember my first management job, the first time I became a leader of a team within an organization, actually came just after I had come back from my first maternity leave with my first child, and which was, you know, which is a subject I'm sure we can come back to, but I was really struck then by how much of the advice that I was getting in management training and management literature echoed some of the things that I was reading about as a new parent, and some of the advice that was coming to me about childcare, certainly not wanting to imply that I would see my team as my children, and you know, that one hopes one has far more kind of equal relationships at work, perhaps, but there were some areas that I was really struck by about the importance of listening, about the importance of empathy, about the importance of having confidence in your own judgment and trusting your own instincts, that certainly resonated very strongly with me, both as a parent, but in this context, more importantly, as a leader. And I think, you know, those are sort of personal qualities that I think are absolutely critical to celebrate and to recognise and not to suppress when you're trying to lead, whether it be a small team or a whole organisation. I think the final thing about that, just for this question about leadership, is also about confidence. When I became the CEO of the Global Partnership, it took quite a long time for me to take myself seriously as a leader, see myself in that role. And so I think there are all the sort of human qualities, hopes that everybody might bring to work, but that traditionally have often been seen as something that we must hold on to. But then there's also, I think, the confidence that women need to really take themselves seriously as leaders. Rachel, back to you.
Thank you so much, and good to hear different kind of things being highlighted there as well. And then over to India. Shausha, do you mind sharing as well on this first question? Thank you. Sorry, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, Rachel. So thank you, Rachel. I feel honored to be here speaking on this topic, which is kind of so close to my heart and really needs some discussions. So it's not a mold, you know, where we can say I'm a leader just following a particular style. Basically, leadership is all about having a very non-traditional style where, you know, as our honored speaker from Maldives was saying, that we need to cater to the situation where we are in. But mostly, I believe more in interactive and participative leadership. And the first thing, wherever I go, I try to know my team very well. And once I know my team very well, then it's very easy to delegate and kind of interact also. And then it's the right job for the right person. I always welcome and encourage inputs from my employees throughout the decision-making process. And of course, people who are more experienced in the system, taking ideas, solutions from them initially, and also along the line is very, very important, which I do like as a leader. And I give a great deal of flexibility to work and they have their choice to do the work as they wish and kind of achieve the results. However, sometimes I do have to resort to micromanagement also when there is a dearth of time or the activity is such which is new. And most of the time you don't have to tell people to do this, do that. They do on their own. But sometimes if there is a need, then even that has to be done. And I also always ensure that my female employees are also kind of a part of the decision-making process. And I give them challenging works also. Not like this is a job which my female colleague or my female subordinate will not be able to do. They are always given that job, though I do consider that, yes, they do multitasking. So that has to be kind of taken into account. So the last part is that how is my style different? I'll not say how it is different, but then I really don't believe in the traditional style of command and control and then always trying to kind of expect that what I'm saying has to be followed. That is not my style. It's more of an interactive and a participative style. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. And again, good to hear different experiences as well, and different things being highlighted. Next, let's hear from Gemma. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to join you at the start of the cafe series for the year, and a very warm kukungta to all my friends there in Thailand. So like my other speakers, I think the word that's come out from all of this has been around being a genuine sort of person in a leadership role, and being quite authentic about what it is you're trying to bring to the role as a person, but also as a leader of an institution, be it a National Statistics Office, be the director of the ESCAP Statistics Division there, like Rachel, Claire's role as the CEO of the Global Partnership. I think we all bring a genuineness that basically we're trying to make a difference and leave our roles and the people that we interact with better off. And I think that's something that we bring as leaders in our region. I too have a bit of a democratic or consultative type. Well, I like to think I have a democratic and consultative style of leadership. There's so many opportunities and so much that we can achieve. We just can't do it alone. And so as institutions and as representative for our organisations, you know, we achieve much more by having so many capable people and structures and sort of opportunities around us. So to me, that consultative and teamwork approach to leadership is so important, and making sure that we listen to the ideas, listen to what people are looking for, so that we can deliver something as a whole. I also wanted to put on the table here that I think a lot of us, and I know all of you, I think we're very much coaches and mentoring type style forms of leadership as well. I'm finding now, as I get to the sort of the last sort of decade or so of my career, I'm sort of saying, well, we have built so much experience up, and we know so much from experience that we have had over the years, that being able to coach and mentor the next cohort of people coming into our organisations is really quite important. So it's not just that team leadership, managerial, sort of consultative approach, but I think we move more into the coaching and mentoring approach as well, and coaching other people and people in our teams, as well as others, our peers, to actually see the value of what it is that we're aspiring to, the visions that we might have, and then sort of bringing them along and instilling that confidence in them, as several of people have said. So when I reflected, Rachel, on the question of, do I see a lot of difference between men and women, or male and female leaders, I must admit I haven't, over my career in statistics, seen a lot of difference. I tend to see more difference, less in gender, but more in the professions that we bring. So Claire mentioned before, you know, the statistical profession, there's actually quite a lot of women in it. But then if you bring the economists, they bring a different leadership style. The head of the Australian Bureau of Statistics comes from a policy agency, so you know, Department of Finance, Department of Treasury. So he brings a very different perspective. I've seen in our institution, the more very strong methodological people bring a different style. So I tend to find the style differences is more to do with your background rather than your gender. But having said that, a lot of those roles, like policy roles and economist roles, tend to be, well, in my experience, a bit more dominated by male. So whether it's a male or it's the economist, I'm not sure, but they bring a different style depending on their professional background, more so than their gender. Thanks, Rachel. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, really interesting reflection on that. And now, last but certainly not least on this kind of round of questions, Dr. Wittison, if you wanted to share your reflections. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Rachel, and a very good afternoon to you all from Bangkok. Thanks for inviting me to join this session, very interesting. I think this question really brought me to a journal article. I really look back what leadership styles And then once I saw it 6 styles, and perhaps some might have had more than 6 styles. And I look at that. So I think to myself, as a leader, we of course try to flex from one style to another. And to me, once I read that, as Gemma said, we intend to be democratic and coaching leadership style. And I talk to myself from my good intention to be good actions as well in reality. And what I learned from that, from this 6 leadership style, I think that I intend not to choose the extreme, do as I say, and the opposite extreme, that is do nothing, laissez-faire. And I would prefer to do the thing as the middle pathway. And this is pretty much represent Thai culture in Thai society as well. That is a balanced pathway of leadership style. And of course, no matter what style, it got to be towards results and performance. To me, if make it into easy, normal vocabularies, I would say I respect people and my colleagues, my fellow, and at the same time, I recognize them as professional staff. As such, this is a privilege. So they got to know what their responsibility. Once they take respect, they got to respond respectfully as well. And this is the degree of freedom. As I said, that once you obtain such privilege, you got to do good as well, to respond as good as you could in your profession. I would go in depth a bit in Thailand NSO. The reputation come from the performance. So once they do well, that is to be taken into account when promotion and career advancement. If I make a conclusion, I think I focus on performance and results. And with this, I understand that in the Thai society, I review a study, one small study. It is said that team-oriented leaders are mostly preferred by Thais. That is very interesting. And of course, non-confrontation style is pretty much preferred in the society. I think this is the big picture that I would respond. And between male, I would say leadership style. I think to me, I saw it as indifferent. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. And really interesting to hear more there about the culture and how culture affects leadership style for both men and women. So really, really interesting to think about that as well. So I'm going to go on to the next question. And what I will do, sorry, I'll give you the question and then I'll stick to the same order, but I'll start this time with Claire and they'll kind of do it in a rotating order. So we're not always starting with exactly the same person, just to pre-warn you. So second question is, given the gender data gap, how important is female leadership in official statistics? And if again, you can keep your answers relatively short, then we can leave enough time at the end. So over to you, Claire.
Sorry, struggling with the unmute button there. You'd think we'd know how to do it now, wouldn't you, after 2 years? But anyway, thank you. No, I think a really important question. And obviously, this is the key question, as well as thinking about our role as leaders and so on. We have to also think very practically about, well, what difference does it make? In what way does having women leaders in statistics lead to better statistics? Because that is obviously, as well as thinking about people's experience at work and the kind of well-being of employees, we also need to think about the product. And that is a really critical part of this conversation. I mean, I think, you know, we have a huge sort of body of work now, and more examples coming almost every day from our respective countries and institutions of how having a more diverse having kind of more diverse inputs leads to better outputs, and having a group of people responsible for the production, the collection of data, the analysis, and ultimately the production of statistics is going to lead to better statistics, simply because you have more diverse perspectives, and therefore a more rounded view about what's important. You know, as we know, statistics is essentially a sort of abstraction from reality, and choices are made about what are the important things that need to be the parts of people's lives that need to have data to be collected about them. What are the things which in a sense are important enough to either be registered in the data, and in what are the sort of assumptions that we need to make in converting that data into statistics. And those things are all conditioned, as we all know, I think now, by our own individual and institutional and social biases and assumptions. So the more different perspectives that we bring to bear on all of those choices, ultimately the better our statistics is going to be. You know, there are many examples. There was one a couple of weeks ago in my own country, in the UK, where there was a sort of challenge. The official rate of inflation was issued by the National Statistics Office, which, as we know, is, like every country, is relatively high at the moment in the UK. And there was a sort of media campaign launched after that, which essentially said, look, you know, this is the official rate of inflation, but actually many of us on low incomes trying to feed families and so on are facing much higher price rises than are reflected in the official figures, because the prices of some of the staple foods, which really are critical if you're trying to feed a family, have risen much faster than the official average rate of inflation. And it's sort of insights like that, I think, which illustrate the importance of bringing diverse perspectives to bear on the creation of statistics, and obviously the perspective of women, and given the sort of gender roles and the fact that in many countries women are still in a different position in relation to work, in relation to domestic work and the family and so on. It's absolutely critical to have those perspectives included in the assumptions that we make when we're constructing statistics. So I think having more women in positions of leadership in statistics ultimately will give us better statistics, and that is clearly in the interest of everybody. Thank you, Rachel. Back to you.
Thanks, Claire. And then let's hear from Sharjah. Thank you.
So thanks, Rachel. And a lot has been said, very rightly so, that different experiences bring different type of value addition and products in any organization. Having said that, I'll be a little more specific, though I feel that it's too early to say. But since all of us are working in NSOs or something related to data and statistics, I would say that in this regime of SDGs, it is more important to have female leadership. And when we see the indicators, the SDG indicators, so many indicators, only it is just illustrative. I'm saying that, you know, in health, in education, in gender, where, you know, those indicators, we don't have methodologies, we are struggling for the data, and we do need to bridge those data gaps and kind of concretize the methodologies. If we have female leadership and who could really go through those indicators and see what is the best way of kind of bringing data across the table. Maybe it is administrative data sets, why we don't have data, disaggregated data, because SDGs is after all about leaving no one behind. And for that, for any reform, for any development, data on women has to be there, properly there. And with female leadership, of course, I feel that, yeah, we may be making a dent in that. And there is a small example in India where the National Health and Family Survey, which is held every 5 years, now it is being done every 3 years. when the female investigators and surveyors went to the field for getting the data, definitely the input and the response was much better as compared to their male counterparts for various reasons, which we all know. And at that time, there was a lady who was at the helm of the affairs in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in India. So it was a line ministry which was exclusively where the census health and family welfare survey is conducted. And so there are many other examples where probably so much of time is not there, so we cannot discuss everything. But to begin with now, with this SDG era, with the importance of indicators which have so much of social and economic reference, we do need to have some endeavor so that our top leadership is maybe female. And many countries have adopted that. In India, we really don't have that problem, because in India, there are lots of female leaders at the top, at least in the National Statistical Office. I remember when I was the DG, all the 3 DGs were ladies. And I could remarkably see the difference which it was making, be it administration, be it statistics side, or be it training. All the 3 DGs were and the survey. So we do have to kind of make some attempt, and with policies, of course, there are other questions where we'll talk about that. And a very small thing that once, our young colleagues see that there is a leader, a female leader at the top, they also feel very confident, and kind of they are also motivated to, as Gemma was saying, the thing which she said was kind of so important, a very unsaid thing, that, there is a style which women bring, the sincerity, the commitment when they are at the top. And obviously, that is how our peers are also groomed. So, yeah, these are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharja. And we'll move over to Gemma. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. So a few years ago, when I was working in this area of measuring the well-being of societies, or these years it's been called beyond GDP, measuring progress and looking at measures beyond GDP. Here at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, we did this characterisation of our statistics into four categories. We basically said our economic and demography statistics are like gold standard. Our social statistics are silver. Our environmental statistics are sort of bronze. And a big shout out to everybody in Beijing in the Olympics while I have this gold, silver, bronze. And then our governance type statistics are tin. They're not even on the radar as much as our others. And I found this framework extremely useful to use in a lot of different settings. And in this setting of how important is female leadership, I think it's a useful one, because when I look at our gold standard statistics, whether it's here in Australia or across Asia Pacific, a lot of those programs, our economic statistics programs, are led by mainly male cohorts. If you look at the leadership of the Economic Statistics Division in New York, that's male cohort. A lot of the economic areas of our fields are led by men. You then go to our social statistics, which are primarily more silver gold blend. And a lot of them are exactly like Charlotte said, health, education, welfare, mainly led by women in an agency. So often the women are heading up social statistics programs. The environmental ones, I'm not sure, it's probably a mix. A lot of time it comes from the economic background, because we're dealing with the economic frameworks. And then governance, I'm not sure where governance tends to sit. So often it's in the social space, because we run household surveys for them. So to me, importance of female leadership using that framework is to mix your leaders around within an institution, and mix your economic statisticians, put them in the social statistics area, put your social statistics leaders in charge of the economic statistics. They'll bring all their leadership skills and all the rest of it. But by mixing up your gender cohorts, I think you get a better institution and a powerful system because people are looking at things through different lenses. And I'm thinking here at the moment is there's quite a debate around should we expand the national accounts framework into like social transfer and more distributional type accounts and capitals. And I think women and the people who generally work in social statistics would have a lot of leadership and professionalism that they could bring to that discussion. So that's my thoughts on this one. Rachel, is how important is female leadership? I think it's extremely important to break those stereotypes and those institutional stereotypes that we tend to create within our different domains of statistics. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, and yeah, really interesting. If we can go next to Thailand, back to Dr. Waterson. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Rachel. Another question on gender data gap. Of course, it does exist in the globally and nationally in the case of Thailand as well. And once I look in WEF World Gender Gap Index, it's shown that the index is widening. Even if I'm not mistaken, it is said that it might take over 100 years to cross the gap. So that this is really the big task and challenging to all of us. And to me, I would say to cross this data gap, it is both easy and hard at the same time. Easy solution might be a very simple solution. Just go and collect disaggregated data and just do it. And why we can't do that? This make me look at the SDG indicator, especially SDG 5 in the case of Thailand. We look at core indicator 22, SDG 5 indicator. We have 13 available, and we have 8 indicators not available, and we have 1 not applicable. So that we got to go back and have a look in detail what the obstacle to have had such situation to prevent us not to have the indicators at the minimum requirement. I would say that this we need to work more in detail, both in terms of methodology, which is got to be well developed, and definition and other stuff as well. And go back to female leadership in official statistics. Again, even I myself is female, I still think male or female are indifferent in these areas. We got to do the work. And of course, to collect gender data, we got to have policy support. And in the case of Thailand, with budget scarcity and the policy priority in collecting data. Right now in Thailand, NSO, we have problem with government budget, so that we still need to work more in terms of methodology, innovative and efficient way of collecting data. This is my thought. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And then the last contribution on this question, over to you, Aisha. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I would say that in general, by reducing the gender gap will improve the livelihoods of women and families, particularly those who are trapped in poverty. So this is because in a country like Maldives, where the divorce rate is very high, like nearly 50% of the marriages, they end up in divorce. So in that case, women they end up being the main breadwinner for the family, and in addition to taking care of the children. So being women and then providing the data to the policy makers and those who are formulating programs, it is very important that they understand the situation and they can address that data gaps, or and also they can provide the data for the policymakers in providing programs, and that is going to be formulated for the marginalized populations such as the migrant workers and special needs, and also the islands where the population is very less. So I would say that it would be a very good, and it is very important to have female leaders in the official statistics, as they understand the situation better than their male counterparts.
Thank you so much. I'm aware that time, as we expected, kind of ticks on, and it's always difficult. So we're running slightly behind time in order for us to get through all of the questions. So what I would ask you to do, the next question, I'm going to ask, how can women leaders support other women in their organisations? But if you could perhaps try and limit your answers to kind of what one main thing that you can think of. So, you know, how can women leaders support other women in their organisations? But if you can try and limit your answers. And I'm going to carry on in the same order, but starting this time with Sharjah and then going round. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. I just have to tell one point. This is what you meant?
Yeah, if you can keep it keep it short. Thank you.
I'll keep it very short, Rachel, very short. And yeah, so what I've, as officers who are our subordinates who have just joined, we have to keep telling them that they have to be keen learners. And that is one very major thing which I would really, the message which I always try to give my junior colleagues, that they have to never stop learning. And sometimes when they join the service, very routine works are given to them, and they should continue to do that. And if they are joining the statistical fraternity, it is very important that they get used to the concepts, be it national accounts, be it SDGs, be it environment statistics or the price statistics. They have to sensitize themselves, because after all, they have to prove themselves and reach ahead of others. This is what I always feel as a leader. Also, sometimes, they may be criticized for something, but they have to take that criticism as a positive criticism. If it is a negative one, they should totally ignore it. And if not, then they should take it as a positive criticism, because once they come out from colleges and work in an office environment, it is slightly different. You're working for an organization, you have to add value to the organization. And also, if again in the statistical fraternity, it is very important that people who are in the national statistical offices, the youngsters, they have to keep a very close coordination with the line ministries where other statistical work is also being done, so that they have a holistic idea of what is happening and they are able to contribute positively. And obviously then they have to be independent in their thinking, but at the same time, they have to be team players also, because totally being independent will not work. And especially, again, this is with reference to statistical leadership, because after all, our assistant directors, our deputy directors, one day they are going to become directors, additional directors, and also director generals. So that is my thought. Hope I did not take much time, Rachel.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And then moving around the world to Gemma.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rachel. Let me be. So I think in terms of supporting each other, events like today, I think are really important. I think women actually like to talk to each other. I think we get inspiration and we get motivated and we get a lot of talking to each other. And so to me, from a support point of view, I think reaching out and talking to one another, like at events like today, is really important. If we're in meetings, if we're in side events at the UN Statistical Mission, if we're in the World Data Forum, supporting one another and going to each other's events and recognising the contribution that everybody makes is really, I think, very, very important. You know, we don't have the opportunity these days to be at an event like this and then go out for lunch or pat each other on the back at some event if you're into that. But I think this supporting each other by being present, joining events like this, telling people that they've done a good job is really the best encouragement we can to give each other. Because I do think women have this need for not so much recognition, but a need for reinforcement that what we're doing is the right thing and is valuable. So that would be the probably the tip that it rings best to me. Thanks very much, Rachel.
Thanks, and great to get some, in this section, it's just great to hear some really positive examples of what we can actually do. So great to get into kind of the practicalities. And then moving over to Dr. Wutterson, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. For this one, I really like the way to support each other among girls. So right now, I don't say women or female. That would have said that in the workplace, they have male network. So here we have girls network as well. So that I understand that as a leader in Thailand in SO, I might have positive impact. This is one kind of support that is career advancement that all my young female staff would have looked at. Because in Thailand in SO, we would have said that a female staff are at senior position and well represented in this organization. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. And then moving on to Aisha. Thanks.
I totally agree with what the other panelists have said. In addition to that, I would say that what we female leaders, what we can do is we can make policies that are friendly, that are focused on women, such as providing childcare facilities within the organization and also providing paid maternity leave, things like that, which can improve a lot in providing support to the women. And also we could have building connections and support groups within the organizations for the new mothers and for the new staff in how to cope, in understanding, letting them understand the organization culture, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, some practical suggestions as well there, which is really great. And then over to you, Claire, on this one. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the importance of supporting each other and encouraging particularly younger women is really important. But just picking up on the practicality point, I mean, I've benefited hugely in my career from flexible working, in particular, from being able to work part-time, you know, take time off when my children had school holidays and so on. And for me, that's been absolutely central to having the confidence to take on leadership roles and knowing that I would be also able to do all the other things that I wanted to do with my life. So I've always been, you know, really tried to push the boundaries in the institutions that I've been in around flexible working and really tried to make sure that alongside a focus on delivery, I've really encouraged women to ask for what they need in terms of fitting their work around their family commitments, because I firmly believe that in that case, you know, you get better work as well as happier colleagues. So that would be the thing that I would add. Thanks.
Thank you. And again, yeah, really, really practical kind of suggestion on what's helped. So really good to hear that. Just moving on then, we wanted to kind of look at the area around kind of barriers, but it's interesting from what people have shared already, perhaps, that I'm not sure whether or not, everybody would agree that there were actually barriers to female leadership. But I think it would still be good to hear about, what do you think is the most significant barrier to female leadership? And then from your own kind of personal experience, what has been the most significant barrier in your career? And Gemma, it's your turn to start first on this one. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Now, this is a very tricky one, and I just don't know if it's a female thing or if it's a personal thing or a style thing. But I'm more and more convinced that women over communicate, and what I mean there is I think we often share an idea or put something on the table, and then we talk about the opportunities, but then we also talk about the risks, and then we also talk about the this bit and this bit, and I'm just finding more and more these days when I'm in, say, a meeting, a leadership meeting, often people who get their ideas agreed to are more judicious. They don't put all the issues on the table from the outset, and I'm just seeing Claire nodding here, and I'm just wondering if one of the barriers, it might be my barrier rather than a female barrier, but I'm just wondering if one of the barriers that we need to be conscious of is are we over communicating or not? Or not so much over communicate, but putting everything on the table at the start rather than building up the narrative. And I've just seen it a few times. Either I know I do it, I'm very conscious of it, but I'm just also seeing it in other forums where the women can have a propensity to be very comprehensive in their responses or their introduction or their proposals, and it can work against them, whereas I see other strategies played out by others drip feeding the information, and it can be more successful. But look, I would be very open, I'm very open to be argued against on this, but I just think that's something that we need to think about as women, is our communication style and our communication approach, and whether we're being as effective as we can be compared to others at the leadership table. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you. And it's always good to be challenged on things like that. And definitely in the chat, it would be good to hear from some other people as well, what you think, men and women. Do you think that is a general issue, or is Gemma alone? No, I doubt that you're very much alone in this at all. But it would be good, yeah. So do feel free to kind of post what you think as well in the chat bar. So please, yeah, say a bit more about what you think on communication style. And then next, we wanted to go to Dr. Woodison. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. Again, thinking about barriers, the first thing that might come is physical strength. Some might have thought that the work that for female leadership is not deal with physical function, but endurance based on the physical strength as well, and that is shown by the mental strength. So if I look back on the Thai research in this area, they discuss on the stereotypical expectation of Thai female leaders. Two main barriers that have been mentioned is emotional unstableness. That is the first. Second one is indecisiveness. So these two expectations, these two factors are very interesting. And if any females really want to make a breakthrough, they got to build up their own for overcoming these two expectation or the shortfall as well. So that I think this also agree with me. Even when I read on, I look at myself as well. Okay, I got to follow this. This is a Thai expectation. Back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, good to hear different kind of insights, but also some similarities as well in that, coming back to kind of some of the same issues. And then if we can move on to Aisha and your experiences and what you think on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that gender bias and also the stereotyping of work in the environment against women leadership aspirations, that's one of the things. And also as women, we should be ready to take other roles as well, because we have a family responsibility and women is seen as primary caretaker of family. So whether you are CEO, head, or a female leader, once you reach home, you are a mother, you are a daughter or daughter-in-law, you still have your part to play at home. So you should be ready to take that as well, I would say. So that's one of the challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that challenge. And then Claire, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, we've heard quite a lot about some of the barriers that women impose on themselves, and they're very real. I have personally made it a New Year's resolution to not end every statement in a meeting with something like, does that make sense? Or do you see what I mean? To try to constantly be undermining myself in that way. So a lot of what people say really resonates. And I think, we have to be confident in what we say. As Gemma said, think strategically, go for the big jobs. I think women often self-center. Oh no, I couldn't possibly do that. But I think, I think all this is really important. And as women, in a sense, who've already made it, we absolutely need to model those sort of behaviours for other women. But I don't think that a focus on women's own behaviour should blind us to the fact that just pure discrimination still exists. It's not women's fault that women are not. If women are not progressing, that's not necessarily women's fault. My first management job, I remember so well, quite early days, going to a meeting with a senior member of parliament in the UK with my colleague who was junior to me but male, and the guy, we go into the meeting and he absolutely, it takes about half the meeting to persuade this guy that I am the more senior person and not the other guy's secretary. And we've all had those experiences. So we absolutely, we can control our own behavior. That's the only thing we can control. So we need to absolutely think about that and not undermine ourselves. But I also don't think that we should get into a kind of, I think that sort of dynamic that it's up to women to change and become more like men and, be more aggressive. And if they don't, then it's their own fault, shouldn't also be the dominant kind of story that we're telling here. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think that chimes with what other people as well are saying in the kind of chat bar as well. It might be about some things we need to change, but also it's about some of those perceptions actually and kind of the stereotypes that need to change as well. Shailaja, on this, do you want to share your thoughts? Thank you.
Yeah, Rachel, everything has been said, but yeah, I'll just bring out one point. When it is a participative leadership, and many a times, we are taking feedbacks from our people, from our team. Once or twice, you do feel that sometimes, the feeling is that maybe, we don't have answers to so many things. And especially as Claire was saying, from our male counterparts. So, we are taking those inputs. But that is not a long-term thing. I always feel that, once they know you as a leader and they know that you mean business and you are committed, then probably they also everybody starts understanding that, yes, this is a process. And maybe, that type of a transformational leadership where people are aware of what they have to do, by and by they all start realizing that this is what is expected of them, and they will start doing it on their own, and then you really don't have to tell them anything. Apart from this, of course, all those small things where, if you are in office till 9 o'clock at night during parliament session, then your family is there. Sometimes when children are very small, you are kind of divided mentally, that whether you have to be here or there. And flexi work hours was being discussed. It is being discussed, but the only thing is that then policies have to be such, because in a organization, in a government organization, where the office timings are from 9 to 5:30 or 9:30 to 6, then probably there have to be special provisions for women to kind of take flexi work hours and all, which currently are not there. Of course, there is a lot of maternity leave and all those things are there. So this is what is required, that we'll have to kind of further such policies where, we have a holistic setup on the table which can enhance participation of women at senior levels. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you for sharing, some of those kind of practical suggestions on some of the things which would actually help to address the barriers, but also kind of recognizing some of these things are easier to address than others. And when we look at some of the kind of data on it as well, there are, as we know, some very kind of ingrained things where we would really have to kind of challenge, society more generally, our cultures that we live in. And even in what we've kind of said just then, we're talking about flexible working, but, it's kind of, again, an assumption that it would be the woman that's kind of taking the main role in kind of looking after the children. And yet, I guess there's a bigger question there, isn't it, about why that always falls to the woman, and what we can do to support men as well, who might want to kind of actually take some more of that role. And we are seeing, aren't we, in countries, I know in the UK, where some of the legislation on that's changed now, and encouraging men can take the part of the maternity leave, and it could be shared between them, rather than just assuming always that it's going to be the woman that takes all of the maternity leave. But we kind of recognize there's some easy things to change, and there are definitely some things that are going to take much longer, but that doesn't mean that we don't just accept them. We're coming on to the last kind of round of questions. So just to kind of warn you, this is the last round. So kind of, I guess, take it as the opportunity to also give any kind of final kind of messages before we get on to any kind of questions and answers. So for the final kind of question, wanted to ask, what advice would you give to, it will probably be younger women entering this profession or organisation, or even what messages would you have given to your younger self? So when you were kind of starting out, what would you have said, or what advice would you be able to give? And for this one, we're going to start with Dr. Wootison. Thank you.
Thanks, Rasha. I think I would give to young women, my staff, I would tell them, be yourself and be natural, because you cannot be others except yourself. And you need to learn. And at the same time, you might need to unlearn, because old knowledge may not be appropriate in this changing world, and relearn the new thing. And moreover, in Thai stereotypical expectation, as I said before, that is about emotional intelligence that you need to build up. And at the same time, decision-making skill that you really need to build up as well. And this is the strength of female in the world of workplace. And moreover, I would say, be proud of yourself. You are humans. And this is what I really need to talk to my young female colleagues. Back to you, Rasha.
Thank you. There's some great advice there. They kind of thing that you could probably put on your notice board as well, to keep reminding oneself about that. Be proud of yourself, be yourself, learn and relearn. Really important lessons. Can we moving around the world to Maldives? Aisha, if you wouldn't mind sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, my advice would be, opportunities don't always knock on your door. Sometimes you are the one who has to go and seek for them. So gender does not define how far you can go. Just believe in yourself and be ready to take new challenges. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you again. Great advice for everyone, male and female as well, very much so. Claire, over to you.
Thank you. I think for me it would be about being brave, you know, and perhaps being confident about, you know, pursuing opportunities, really following on from what Aishat was saying, you know, being confident about pursuing opportunities that you really want. A couple of times in my career, you know, a big job has come up and there's always been 100 reasons why not to do it. Oh, you know, my kids are a bit young. Oh, I'm not sure I could do it. Oh, that isn't exactly the job, that I don't have those exact qualifications, you know, and often those times I've seen men come in and take those jobs and turn them into the jobs that they wanted, rather than worrying, do I fit the job? They've made the job fit them. And I think it's that sort of confidence that perhaps, you know, I certainly feel has sort of held me back a little bit, and I've observed that in other women too. So I think be brave would be if we're adding to the motivational notice board, I would say be brave would be mine.
Great advice. Thank you. And Shailaja, can we move over to you now? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think for a young woman, I will always say that never stop learning, learn and learn. And wherever you go, try to learn the system, because, you know, that will give you confidence. Once you're confident, you will be important. Once you are important, people will talk about you. And, you know, automatically that male-female gap will go. Once you're confident, you work, you are committed to the organization, you know the organization. And of course, as youngsters, all sorts of work is given to youngsters. They know how to sieve it out. They have to, even we, you know, like an assistant director has to shoulder the maximum, because in offices, it's unlike the UN system where, you know, it's a totally bureaucratic system. The files move to one, to the next, to the next, to the next. So they have to shoulder a little extra responsibility also. And yeah, be yourself, take challenges, don't be afraid, don't think that, oh my, there is so much of work at home also, how will I do it in office? Because once, you know, that type of an attitude creeps in, then, because after all, we are looking at women leaders, and once we are looking at women leaders, they have to kind of start working for it once they are young. Only then they will have the confidence and that value to kind of reach that top. And I'm sure many women, at least in India, are working with that attitude, because when I joined service, out of 40 officers who had joined through the Union Public Service Commission, only 5 were women and 35 were men. But now when I see the ratio and when I go to the talk to the probationers, the ratio is 50-50, sometimes even 55-45. So they're doing so well. And maybe, you know, somewhere along the line, because of all these discussions and those policies, changes have come. And I'm very positive and very hopeful that, yeah, we will have a time when, you know, we will have 50-50 leadership, or maybe 60-40 leadership, or 75-25 leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on this question then, Gemma, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. Look, this to me has been a great career choice, and for all the young women out there, or all the youth out there, actually, I'd encourage them to look very seriously at our statistical and data profession. It's such a great career choice. It offers so many opportunities to us. We've just heard of, you know, really good working conditions, flexible working opportunities, loads of inspirations. You know, we've heard today inspirations from across not only Asia Pacific, but yourself, Rachel, and Claire from the UK. You know, there's so much inspiration out there. And what I particularly like about working in the data and statistics field is that what we do really makes a difference. And you can see a really big difference, like the measurement of COVID prevalence, or the the ability to make sure that there's a gender disaggregation in some of our labour statistics, or you know, putting effort into understanding what's happening in education and in health. So to me, our work impacts so many aspects of our domestic societies and economies, but also regionally and globally, that to me this statistics and data has been a great career choice. So yeah, be yourself, be proud of yourself, be brave, but also get into this profession because it has so many opportunities, not just in the National Statistics Office, but also more broadly across government or governments, and then in the international sphere. So to me, I'm very happy with my choice of being in this career, and the more we can encourage more people to join us, I think the world will be a better place. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Gemma. I completely agree with what you were saying. We've got a few questions in the chat bar. I'm not sure how many we'll be able to kind of work through, but it will be good to get some quick reactions to some of them. There was a question early on from Sushita asking which countries have best practices of women's leadership in official statistics, and how official statistics of these differ from others. And I think that also kind of echoes, I think there was another kind of question earlier, later on, and Gemma, you had kind of commented as well on that one. So I don't know, Gemma, whether or not you just want to share a bit about, the kind of examples you've seen that would be interesting that you put in the chat bar. Thank you. Yeah,
sure. Thanks, Rachel. So the question was, what are the best practices in countries with best practice around women's leadership? And look, I'm not aware of any, you know, we're all statisticians, so we all go to, is there any official statistics on this? Is there any data on this, right? There is some really good statistics on statistical leadership that's put out by institutions like Paris 21, I'm pretty sure, that maybe you could do some analysis around. But I actually tend to look at where for some inspiration, and I've shared two in the chat there. From my time working in ESCAP, I was really inspired by many people right across the region. I felt that it was a really good time for the Chief Statistician of New Zealand, who pursued moving beyond the statistical and taking up data stewardship and a data leadership role in New Zealand. I was also very inspired by Fono Malatua in Pacific, who put forward Samoa as the first, was successful in getting Samoa to be the first Pacific island on the Statistical Commission. And there is another couple there from Mongolia and Vietnam, but also we have here with us today Thailand and Maldives and Shajila from India, who there's so many inspiring stories in the region. So to me, I probably look to more anecdotes and what's inspired you, and they were some that inspired me to say, well, what's the inspiration there? And it's been all the things that we've just heard. These leaders were brave, they were themselves, they were proud of what they achieved, they pushed the boundaries, and they made a difference for their countries in a really positive way. So thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else had any reflection on that as well, in terms of any kind of positive role models and examples that we see. I mean, I think it is interesting, like you're saying, there are quite a lot of women in the kind of world of official statistics, and you go to conferences and there are definitely a lot of women there. But I'm not sure in terms of speakers that they're always necessarily as well represented necessarily in the speaking roles. And I wonder whether or not, there is that little bit of kind of self-selection as well that might be going on there. I was just thinking back to the World Data Forum in Bern last year, which is probably the last event I can really remember seeing people face to face in a large group. But, I was very aware, like you say, there were some female speakers, but it definitely, it didn't feel like it was 50-50. But Claire, any reflection?
Thank you. Yes. I mean, I think in the international, just as Gemma was saying, at the level of national statistics, there are lots of inspirational women. Certainly in the international sphere, that's absolutely true. Also, the past and current leaders on data for development in the World Bank, Shai Dabaidi and Haishan Fu, Francesca Perucci at the UN Statistics Division, are all women who are, you know, really sort of significantly changed the game and done so in a way which is hugely supportive of other women, and I think have really kind of set the tone. But just following on from your point, Rachel, about speakers, I think while there are a huge number of women who do have something of a kind of profile in international statistics, the one that worries me more is data science. That obviously, you know, in the world that I inhabit, and for many of us, we're sort of increasingly preoccupied with the connections between official statistics and other data sources. And I think they're particularly in the area of data science is one which is still incredibly male dominated. And you really see that, you know, when you go to conferences or see, you know, look at research, what people are writing in that sort of area of external representation, data science is sort of phenomenally male dominated. I think we're seeing some of the impacts that has on bias in AI systems and so on. But in terms of kind of where the challenges are, certainly that is an area that I would highlight as something that, while things may seem quite good in statistics, we do need to worry about what's coming down the tracks. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, really interesting reflection. I know from my experience, I've been to Big Data London conference, which I think has around 2,000 participants. I remember kind of standing in the queue and, well, women, I think I counted, you know, it's like one woman and then 20 men. But it was kind of, and it really, really felt like that. And as you were kind of just looking around, it was nearly all male dominated. And it very much was, yeah, you're saying the kind of area of data science and kind of computing and things where far more men than women. I'm trying to kind of multitask, looking at the questions as well, and I want to make sure I do justice to them as well. So I know that early on there was a question as well from Taite Habiyakari asking about particularly around that issue of kind of unpaid work and how you kind of, you know, measure it, but making sure. Yeah, so we do have, as you know, as you rightly pointed out, there are definitely standards there. Whether or not countries are applying them is a slightly different question. It's still something that takes a lot more work, I think, and still a lot more to be done in that area. And I think that question as well really links to the other question by Tanya Spisbar about, you know, how data is framed obviously affects the actual policy intervention and what really happens, and asking about what we can do to actually advocate for not just bridging the gender data gap, but actually also, you know, how can we actually shift that focus of the subject onto what really matters and actually getting those kind of policy shifts. I don't know if anybody wanted to reflect a bit on those two questions, anybody from the panel. Hopefully you can see the chat bar, the question from Tanya, and I don't know if Tanya wanted to kind of put her camera on, she could ask it herself. Thanks. Okay, Claire, let's go to you. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is really important. I guess just to sort of take it further from the importance of having gender statistics which reflect women's lives, because ultimately that's how we get changes to those lives. I mean, I'm thinking about, you know, an area like domestic violence, for example, which is, you know, as Gemma said earlier, it's some of those more sort of social and governance type indicators in SDG terms, which are where the data is weakest. But I think we have seen, certainly in advocacy and policy change, where collecting data on some of these really challenging issues does lead quite directly to changes in the law, and therefore to, you know, ultimately it's not a sort of magic wand, but ultimately to changes in people's lives. So I think, you know, and as Gemma also said earlier, that's one of the things that makes this so rewarding as a career, is the way that through women's own experiences, we can lead to a change in the kind of statistical way in which a society is represented through the statistics which are generated about that society, and then that becomes a critical tool not just for policymakers but also for advocates and those who are trying to bring about change. And I think again and again we've seen how data is a really critical instrument of change. We focus, of course, in this conversation mainly on the way that governments use statistics, but we also, they're a critical tool for advocates who are outside government trying to get governments to do different things. And I think, again, that's an area where kind of women's engagement and leadership is so critical. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing that. A really useful response. Did anybody else on the panel want to respond to that or to the other question? Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Witterson. Thank you.
Yes, I think I pretty much prefer to share the case of Thailand. I think when I look at the information about gender gap index that presented by WEF, we saw Thailand as ranked 75 out of 150 something. So this is really show that we still have problem, and we got to understand that how WEF has measured in what aspect, in 4 aspects, and of course in terms of economic, we have seen that is very important because we still see disparity between women and men in the case of paid work in Thailand. So that I think back what kind of policy actions or policy intervention needed to fix or to figure out this problem. I really think hard in this area because the circumstance and information data has shown that in the world of work, men still get senior position in Thailand. Although it is said that Thailand has created a system that grants women to have equal access to employment. But once going to a higher level, we still have problems. So especially the case of Thailand, I would think it might be needed to break through the issue of cultural factor, and that would be hard to work on it because individually women have done well, but in generally on average practice we still see the problem of disparity in workplace between men and women. Back to you, Rasha.
Thank you. I think most of us will probably agree with that yeah, whilst progress has been made, there's still a lot more to be done. I'm just looking through the questions and being conscious of time. I just thought it'd be useful, and just Petra's asked here, maybe we could just quickly go around the panel to ask which woman has inspired you particularly in your career. So just as a nice kind of I might not do it in order, rather than I might just let you answer, as and when you want to, rather than kind of forcing you. And don't feel, if you don't want to answer it, that's of course absolutely fine. But if anyone wants to, yeah, is there a particular woman that has inspired you? Thanks.
Yes, may I?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I think I really want to talk about my mom, because when I look at my mom, I think that is the most inspiration of myself, because her characteristics since I was young, very supportive, generous, kind, and approachable. Those are characteristics that I really want to adopt for my leadership style as well. Back to you, Rasha.
Thank you. A great inspiration. We're all going to want to meet her as well. But yeah, anyone else? Any other examples of women that you really have inspired you? Claire.
Thank you. That was so lovely. And I agree, my mum too. I mean, I don't think there are any, I mean, I think I've had a lot of sort of women, you know, mentors and supporters and men, but, you know, we're talking about the women who have been, you know, I remember less single individual women and more kind of individual inspiring conversations or moments with a sort of group of women along the path, which have all been pivotal for one reason or another. So I would, I think, frame it like that. What are the moments in which a woman has sort of stepped in to help you make a decision, to support you, to be a friend, and something like that. So I hope that all of us at different points can be that women for other women. But I think while we're talking about our families, I would also like to mention my daughter, who is just starting out, who is at university. And I'm just so kind of inspired by this next generation. You know, I feel like a lot of the things that we put up with in our careers that we probably thought we kind of didn't have much choice, this, at least judging by my daughter and her friends, this new generation not going to put up with. And I'm really, really excited to kind of see what they do with the world when they get their hands on it. Thank you.
Great. Okay. No, really interesting. Any other inspirational women?
Yeah, I'll just building on Claire there, Claire's moment example. I think the moment for me with the most inspiring woman was when I returned to work after my first maternity leave. And I had just had twins, so I had double trouble on my hands. And to me, my supervisor at the time, who happened to be a female, she was just so caring, and she said, it's okay, just come back. And I went into a fairly senior role as well, you know, just come in, smooth back in, work out how do you balance work life, caring responsibilities with the senior role. And I think it was that moment, like there's so many inspirational individuals out there, including all of us here, all of you here today. But I think it's those moments, like Claire says, that can leave make you sort of remember, and then make you try and be that person as well, to say, well, it's also helping other people be comfortable in the workforce and that. So that moment was one for me that I look back on from 25 years ago, and I still quite vividly remember it, and set me on a good path to return to work and do all the things we have to, all the juggling we have to do as parents and career in our careers. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether what Shailja or Aisha, if you wanted to share.
So I'll just say one sentence. Rachel, we are all here, like, you know, sitting here discussing because our mothers were different. We were so fortunate to have mothers who were different type of mothers. In fact, when we joined, I joined service 35 years back, and out of a whole lot of all service people used to be there, not only the Indian Statistical Service, the Indian Administrative Service, the Indian Police Service, Revenue Service, Postal Service, Audit and Accounts, Railway Service. So there were 400 people who had joined and 40 were women. So we always used to say that we are here because our mothers are different. They were different, and which we could be groomed in a way that we have all reached here and we have become independent. So, you know, things were so different 35, 40 years back than what they are today. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Aisha, did you want to share anything?
I would like to add, of course, our families were the primary supporters of our career. In addition to that, I would like to add that women supporting women, like in NSO, where I was supported by my boss, our previous chief statistician, Ms. Shahuda, and she was very helpful in giving advice and asking us to, you know, go forward, just take the opportunities. So I would say she was one of the inspiration. Thank you. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all of those comments. And I would just want to say, I don't really want to kind of sum things up because we've said so much and everybody else has put it so well, but I think we can all say, you know, be proud of yourself, go out, be brave and confident, and don't accept the limits that society puts on you. So I would just kind of encourage us all to go out with those words. And I want to say a huge thank you to everybody on the panel. Really appreciate just for your honesty as well, and just being so willing to share from your personal experiences. That's really fantastic. And then also to note, the next Stats Cafe is 21st of February, where we'll be looking at innovations in data dissemination. We'll post that, so you should all be able to see that. But a huge thanks to everybody for your participation, and of course to the audience as well. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.